Anthony Dominick Tony Benedetto, known as Tony Bennett, is an American singer of popular music, standards, show tunes, and jazz. Bennett is also an accomplished painter, having created works under the name Anthony Benedetto that are on permanent public display in several institutions. He is the founder of the Frank Sinatra School of the Arts in New York City. Raised in New York City, Bennett began singing at an early age. He fought in the final stages of World War II as an infantryman with the U.S. Army in the European theater. Afterwards, he developed his singing technique, signed with Columbia Records, and had his first #1 popular song with Because of You in 1951. Several top hits such as Rags to Riches followed in the early 1950s. Bennett then further refined his approach to encompass jazz singing. He reached an artistic peak in the late 1950s with albums such as The Beat of My Heart and Basie Swings, Bennett Sings. In 1962, Bennett recorded his signature song, I Left My Heart in San Francisco. His career and his personal life then suffered an extended downturn during the height of the rock music era. Bennett staged a comeback in the late 1980s and 1990s, putting out gold record albums again and expanding his audience to the MTV generation while keeping his musical style intact. He remains a popular and critically praised recording artist and concert performer in the 2010s. Bennett has won 17 Grammy Awards and 2 Emmy Awards, and has been named an NEA Jazz Master and a Kennedy Center honoree. He has sold over 50 million records worldwide. Life and career. 1926 Euro 1943, early life. Anthony Dominick Benedetto was born on August 3, 1926, in Astoria, Queens, New York City, to grocer John Benedetto and seamstress Anna Surorsi. In 1906, John had emigrated from Podargioni, a rural eastern district of the southern Italian city of Reggio Calabria. Anna had been born in the U.S. shortly after her parents also emigrated from the Calabria region in 1899. Other relatives came over as well as part of the mass migration of Italians to America. Tony has an older sister, Mary, and an older brother, John Jr. with a father who was ailing and unable to work. The children grew up in poverty. John Sr. instilled in his son a love of art and literature and a compassion for human suffering, but died when Tony was 10 years old. The experience of growing up in the Great Depression and a distaste for the effects of the Hoover administration would make the child a lifelong Democrat. Young Tony grew up listening to Al Jolson, Eddie Cantor, Judy Garland, and Bing Crosby as well as jazz artists such as Louis Armstrong, Jack Teagarden, and Joe Venuti. His uncle Dick was a tap dancer in vaudeville, giving him an early window into show business, and his uncle Frank was the Queensborough Library Commissioner. By age 10 he was already singing, and performed at the opening of the Triborough Bridge, standing next to Mayor Fiorello LaGuardia who patted him on the head. Drawing was another early passion of his. He became known as the class caricaturist at PS 141 and anticipated a career in commercial art. He began singing for money at age 13. Performing as a singing waiter in several Italian restaurants around his native Queens. He attended New York's School of Industrial Art where he studied painting and music and would later appreciate their emphasis on proper technique. But he dropped out at age 16 to help support his family. He worked as a copyboy and runner for the Associated Press in Manhattan and in several other low-skilled, low-paying jobs. However, he mostly set his sights on a professional singing career, returning to performing as a singing waiter, playing and winning amateur nights all around the city, and having a successful engagement at a Paramus, New Jersey, nightclub. 1944 Euro 1950, World War II and after, Benedetto was drafted into the United States Army in November 1944, during the final stages of World War II. He did basic training at Fort Dix and Fort Robinson as part of becoming an infantry rifleman. Benedetto ran afoul of a sergeant from the South who disliked the Italian from New York City and heavy doses of KP duty or bar cleaning resulted. Processed through the huge La Alva replacement depot, in January 1945, he was assigned as a replacement infantryman to the 255th Infantry Regiment of the 63rd Infantry Division, a unit filling in for the heavy losses suffered in the Battle of the Bulge. He moved across France, and later, into Germany. As March 1945 began, he joined the front line and what he would later describe as a front row seat in hell. As the German army was pushed back to its homeland, Benedetto and his company saw bitter fighting in cold winter conditions, often hunkering down in foxholes as German 88mm guns fired on them. At the end of March, they crossed the Rhine and entered Germany, engaging in dangerous house-to-house, town-after-town fighting to clean out German soldiers. During the first week of April, they crossed the Kocher River, and by the end of the month reached the Danube. During his time in combat, Benedetto narrowly escaped death several times. The experience made him a pacifist. He would later write, "Anybody who thinks that war is romantic obviously hasn't gone through one," and later say, "It was a nightmare that's permanent. I just said, this is not life. This is not life." At the war's conclusion he was involved in the liberation of a Nazi concentration camp near Landsberg, where some American prisoners of war from the 63rd Division had also been held. Benedetto stayed in Germany as part of the occupying force, but was assigned to an informal Special Services band unit that would entertain nearby American forces. His dining with a black friend from high school at a time when the army was still racially segregated led to his being demoted and reassigned to Graves Registration Service duties. Subsequently, he sang with the 314th Army Special Services Band under the stage name Joe Burry. He played with many musicians who would have post-war careers. Upon his discharge from the Army and return to the States in 1946, Benedetto studied at the American Theatre Wing on the GI Bill. He was taught the bel canto singing discipline, which would keep his voice in good shape for his entire career. He continued to perform wherever he could, including while waiting tables. Based upon a suggestion from a teacher at American Theatre Wing, he developed an unusual approach that involved imitating, as he sang, the style and phrasing of other musicians such as that of Stan Getz' saxophone and Art Tatum's piano helping him to improvise as he interpreted a song. He made a few recordings as Burry in 1949 for Small Leslie Records, but they failed to sell. In 1949, Pearl Bailey recognized Benedetto's talent and asked him to open for her in Greenwich Village. She had invited Bob Hope to the show. Hope decided to take Benedetto on the road with him, and simplified his name to Tony Bennett. In 1950, Bennett cut a demo of Boulevard of Broken Dreams, and was signed to the major Columbia Records label by Mitch Miller. 1951–1959, first successes. Warned by Miller not to imitate Frank Sinatra, Bennett began his career as a crooner of commercial pop tunes. His first big hit was, Because of You, a ballad produced by Miller with a lush orchestral arrangement from Percy Faith. It started out gaining popularity on jukeboxes, then reached number 1 on the pop charts in 1951 and stayed there for 10 weeks, selling over 1 million copies. This was followed to the top of the charts later that year by a similarly styled rendition of Hank Williams's Cold, Cold Heart, which helped introduce Williams and country music in general to a wider, more national audience. The Miller and Faith tandem continued to work on all of Bennett's early hits. Bennett's recording of Blue Velvet was also very popular and attracted screaming teenaged fans at concerts at the famed Paramount Theater in New York and elsewhere. On February 12, 1952, Bennett married Ohio art student and jazz fan Patricia Beach, whom he had met the previous year after a nightclub performance in Cleveland. 2,000 female fans dressed in black gathered outside the ceremony at New York's St. Patrick's Cathedral in mock mourning. The couple had 2 sons, D'Andrea and Degel. A third number 1 came in 1953 with Rags to Riches. Unlike Bennett's other early hits, this was an up-tempo big band number with a bold, brassy sound and a double tango in the instrumental break. It topped the charts for 8 weeks. Later that year, the producers of the upcoming Broadway musical Kismet had Bennett record Stranger in Paradise as a way of promoting the show during a New York newspaper strike. The song reached the top, the show was a hit, and Bennett began a long practice of recording show tunes. Stranger in Paradise was also a #1 hit in the United Kingdom a year and a half later and started Bennett's career as an international artist. Once the rock and roll era began in 1955, the dynamic of the music industry changed and it became harder and harder for existing pop singers to do well commercially. Nevertheless, Bennett continued to enjoy success, placing 8 songs in the Billboard Top 40 during the latter part of the 1950s, within the middle of an island reaching the highest at number 9 in 1957. For a month in Augusta-September 1956, Bennett hosted the NBC Saturday night television variety show, The Tony Bennett Show, as a summer replacement for The Perry Como Show. Patti Page and Julius La Rosa had in turn hosted the 2 previous months, and they all shared the same singers, dancers, and orchestra. In 1959, Bennett would again fill in for The Perry Como Show, this time alongside Teresa Brewer and J.P. Morgan as co-hosts of the summer-long Perry Presents. 1954–1965, A Growing Artistry. In 1954, the guitarist Chuck Wayne became Bennett's musical director. Bennett released his first long-playing album in 1955, Cloud 7. The album was billed as featuring Wayne and showed Bennett's leanings towards jazz. In 1957, Ralph Sharon became Bennett's pianist and musical director, replacing Wayne. Sharon told Bennett that a career singing sweet saccharine songs like Blue Velvet wouldn't last long, and encouraged Bennett to focus even more on his jazz inclinations. The result was the 1957 album The Beat of My Heart. It used well-known jazz musicians such as Herbie Mann and Nat Adderley, with a strong emphasis on percussion from the likes of Art Blakey, Joe Jones, Latin star Candido Camero, and Chico Hamilton. The album was both popular and critically praised. Bennett followed this by working with the Count Basie Orchestra, becoming the first male pop vocalist to sing with Basie's band. The albums Basie Swings, Bennett Sings and In Person were the well-regarded fruits of this collaboration, with Chicago being one of the standout songs. Bennett also built up the quality, and therefore, the reputation of his nightclub act. In this he was following the path of Sinatra and other top jazz and standard singers of this era. In June 1962, Bennett staged a highly promoted concert performance at Carnegie Hall, using a stellar lineup of musicians including Al Cohn, Kenny Burrell, and Candido, as well as the Ralph Sharon Trio. The concert featured 44 songs, including favorites like I've Got the World on a String, and The Best Is Yet to Come. It was a big success, further cementing Bennett's reputation as a star both at home and abroad. Bennett also appeared on television, and in October 1962 he sang on the initial broadcast of The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson. Also in 1962, Bennett released the song I Left My Heart in San Francisco. Although this reached only number 19 on the Billboard Hot 100, it spent close to a year on various other charts and increased Bennett's exposure. The album of the same title was a top 5 hit and both the single and album achieved gold record status. The song won Grammy Awards for Record of the Year and Best Male Solo Vocal Performance. Over the years, this would become known as Bennett's signature song. In 2001, it was ranked 23rd on an RIAA list of the most historically significant songs of the 20th century. Bennett's following album, I Wanna Be Around, was also a top 5 success, with the title track and The Good Life each reaching the top 20 of the pop singles chart along with a top 10 of the adult contemporary chart. Your Next Year brought the Beatles and the British Invasion, and with them still more musical and cultural attention to rock and less to pop, standards, and jazz. Over the next couple of years, Bennett had minor hits with several albums and singles based on show tunes. His last top 40 single was the number 34 If I Ruled the World from Pickwick in 1965, but his commercial fortunes were clearly starting to decline. An attempt to break into acting with a role in the poorly received 1966 film The Oscar met with middling reviews for Bennett. He did not enjoy the experience and did not seek further roles. A firm believer in the American civil rights movement, Bennett participated in the 1965 Selma to Montgomery marches. Years later he would continue this commitment by refusing to perform in apartheid South Africa. 1965–1979, years of struggle. Ralph Sharon and Bennett parted ways in 1965. There was great pressure on singers such as Lena Horne and Barbra Streisand to record contemporary rock songs, and in this vein, Columbia Records' Clive Davis suggested that Bennett do the same. Bennett was very reluctant, and when he tried, the results pleased no one. This was exemplified by Tony Sings' The Great Hits of Today, before which Bennett became physically ill at the thought of recording. It featured misguided attempts at Beatles and other current songs and a ludicrous psychedelic art cover. Years later, Bennett would recall his dismay at being asked to do contemporary material, comparing it to when his mother was forced to produce a cheap dress. By 1972, he had departed Columbia for the Verve division of MGM Records and had relocated for a stint in London, where he hosted a television show from the Talk of the Town nightclub in conjunction with Thames Television, Tony Bennett from the Talk of the Town. With his new label, he tried a variety of approaches, including some more Beatles material, but found no renewed commercial success, and in a couple more years he was without a recording contract. Bennett and his wife Patricia had been separated since 1965, their marriage a victim of Bennett spending too much time on the road, among other factors. In 1969, Patricia sued him for divorce on grounds of adultery. In 1971, their divorce became official. Bennett had become involved with aspiring actress Sandra Grant while filming The Oscar in 1965. The couple lived together for several years, and on December 29, 1971, they quietly married in New York. They had two daughters, Joanna and Antonia, and moved to Los Angeles. Taking matters into his own hands, Bennett started his own record company, Improv. He cut some songs that would later become favorites, such as, What Is This Thing Called Love? And made two well-regarded albums with jazz pianist Bill Evans, the Tony Bennett Bill Evans album and Together Again, but Improv lacked a distribution arrangement with a major label and by 1977, it was out of business. As the decade neared its end, Bennett had no recording contract, no manager, and was not performing many concerts outside of Las Vegas. His second marriage was failing. He had developed a drug addiction, was living beyond his means, and had the Internal Revenue Service trying to seize his Los Angeles home. 1979–1989, turnaround. After a near-fatal cocaine overdose in 1979, Bennett called his sons Danny and Di for help. "Look, I'm lost here," he told them. "It seems like people don't want to hear the music I make." Danny Bennett, an aspiring musician himself, also came to a realization. The band Danny and his brother had started, Quacky Duck and his Barnyard Friends, had founded and Danny's musical abilities were limited. However, he had discovered during this time that he did have a head for business. His father, on the other hand, had tremendous musical talent, but was having trouble sustaining a career from it and had little financial sense. Danny signed on as his father's manager. Danny got his father's expenses under control, moved him back to New York, and began booking him in colleges and small theaters to get him away from a Vegas image. After some effort, a successful plan to pay back the IRS debt was put into place. The singer had also reunited with Ralph Sharon as his pianist and musical director. By 1986, Tony Bennett was re-signed to Columbia Records, this time with creative control, and released The Art of Excellence. This became his first album to reach the charts since 1972. 1990–1994, An Unexpected Audience. Danny Bennett felt that younger audiences who were unfamiliar with Tony Bennett would respond to his music if given a chance. No changes to Tony's formal appearance, singing style, musical accompaniment, or song choice were necessary or desirable. Accordingly, Danny began regularly to book his father on Late Night with David Letterman, a show with a younger, hip audience. This was subsequently followed by appearances on Late Night with Conan O'Brien, The Simpsons, Muppets Tonight, and various MTV programs. In 1993, Bennett played a series of benefit concerts organized by alternative rock radio stations around the country. The plan worked. As Tony later remembered, I realized that young people had never heard those songs. Cole Porter, Gershwin. They were like, who wrote that? To them, it was different. If you're different, you stand out. During this time, Bennett continued to record, first putting out the acclaimed Look Back Astoria, Portrait of the Artist, then emphasizing themed albums such as the Sinatra homage Perfectly Frank and the Fred Astaire tribute Steppin' Out. The latter two both achieved gold status and won Grammys for Best Traditional Pop Vocal Performance and further established Bennett as the inheritor of the mantle of a classic American great. As Bennett was seen at MTV Video Music Awards shows side by side with the likes of the Red Hot Chili Peppers and Flavor Flav, and as his Steppin' Out with My Baby video received MTV airplay, it was clear that, as the New York Times said, Tony Bennett has not just bridged the generation gap, he has demolished it. He has solidly connected with a younger crowd weaned on rock. And there have been no compromises. The new audience reached its height with Bennett's appearance in 1994 on MTV Unplugged. Featuring guest appearances by rock and country stars Elvis Costello and K.D. Lang, the show attracted a considerable audience and much media attention. The resulting MTV Unplugged, Tony Bennett album went platinum and, besides taking the Best Traditional Pop Vocal Performance Grammy Award for the third straight year, also won the top Grammy Prize of Album of the Year, 1995. Present, no retirement. Since his comeback, Bennett has financially prospered. By 1999, his assets were worth $1 million. He had no intention of retiring, saying in reference to masters such as Pablo Picasso, Jack Benny, and Fred Astaire, right up to the day they died, they were performing. If you were creative, you get busier as you get older. Bennett continued to record and tour steadily, doing 100 shows a year by the end of the 1990s. In concert, Bennett often makes a point of singing one song without any microphone or amplification, demonstrating his skills at vocal projection. One show, Tony Bennett's Wonderful World, Live from San Francisco, was made into a PBS special. Bennett also created the idea behind, and starred in the first episode of, the A&E Network's popular Live by Request series, for which he won an Emmy Award. In addition to numerous television guest performances, Bennett has had cameo appearances as himself in films such as The Scout, Analyze This, and Bruce Almighty. In 1998 he made an unlikely but successful appearance at a mud-soaked Glastonbury in an immaculate white suit and tie. Bennett also published The Good Life, the autobiography of Tony Bennett in 1998. A series of albums, often based on themes, has met with good acceptance. Bennett has won 8 more Best Traditional Pop Vocal Performance or Best Traditional Pop Vocal Album Grammys in the subsequent years, most recently for the year 2011. Bennett has sold over 50 million records worldwide during his career. Accolades came to Bennett. For his contribution to the recording industry, Tony Bennett was given a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame at 1560 Vine Street. Bennett was inducted into the Big Band and Jazz Hall of Fame in 1997, was awarded the Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award in 2001, and received a Lifetime Achievement Award from the American Society of Composers, Authors and Publishers in 2002. In 2002, Q magazine named Tony Bennett in its list of the 50 bands to see before you die. On December 4, 2005, Bennett was the recipient of a Kennedy Center honor. Later, a theatrical musical review of his songs, called I Left My Heart, a salute to the music of Tony Bennett, was created and featured some of his best-known songs such as I Left My Heart in San Francisco, Because of You, and Wonderful. The following year, Bennett was inducted into the Long Island Music Hall of Fame. Bennett frequently donates his time to charitable causes, to the extent that he is sometimes nicknamed Tony Benefit. In April 2002, he joined Michael Jackson, Chris Tucker and former President Bill Clinton in a fundraiser for the Democratic National Committee at New York's Apollo Theater. He has also recorded public service announcements for Civitan International. In the late 1980s, Bennett entered into a long-term romantic relationship with Susan Crowe, a former New York City schoolteacher who was 33 years his junior. Bennett and Crowe founded Exploring the Arts, a charitable organization dedicated to creating, promoting, and supporting arts education. At the same time they founded the Frank Sinatra School of the Arts in Queens, a public high school dedicated to teaching the performing arts, which opened in 2001 and would have a very high graduation rate. On June 21, 2007, Bennett married Crowe in a private civil ceremony in New York that was witnessed by former Governor Mario Cuomo. Danny Bennett continues to be Tony's manager while Di Bennett is a recording engineer who has worked on a number of Tony's projects and who has opened Bennett Studios in Englewood, New Jersey. Tony's younger daughter Antonia is an aspiring jazz singer. In August 2006, Bennett turned 80 years old. The birthday itself was an occasion for publicity, which then extended through the rest of the following year. Duets, an American classic, reached the highest place ever on the albums chart for an album by Bennett and garnered 2 Grammy Awards. Concerts were given, including a high-profile one for New York radio station WLTW-FM. A performance was done with Christina Aguilera and a comedy sketch was made with affectionate Bennett impressionist Alec Baldwin on Saturday Night Live. At Thanksgiving time, Rob Marshall directed television special Tony Bennett, an American classic on NBC, which would win multiple Emmy Awards. Receipt of the Billboard Century Award. And guest mentoring on American Idol Season 6 as well as performing during its finale. He received the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees Humanitarian Award. Bennett was awarded the National Endowment for the Arts Jazz Masters Award in 2006, the highest honor that the United States bestows upon jazz musicians. The year 2008 saw Bennett making 2 appearances on New York State of Mind with Billy Joel at the final concerts given at Shea Stadium, and in October releasing the album A Swingin' Christmas with the Count Basie Big Band, for which he made a number of promotional appearances at holiday time. In 2009, Bennett performed at the conclusion of the final Macworld Conference and Expo for Apple Incorporated, singing The Best Is Yet to Come, and I Left My Heart in San Francisco to a standing ovation, and later making his Jazz Fest debut in New Orleans. In February 2010, Bennett was one of over 70 artists singing on We Are the World 25 for Haiti, a charity single in aid of the 2010 Haiti earthquake. In October he performed I Left My Heart in San Francisco at AT&T Park before the 3rd inning of Game 1 of the 2010 World Series and sang God Bless America during the 7th inning stretch. Days later he sang America the Beautiful at the Rally to Restore Sanity and All Fear in Washington, D.C. In September 2011, Bennett appeared on The Howard Stern Show and named American military actions in the Middle East as the root cause of the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks. Bennett also claimed that former President George W. Bush personally told him at the Kennedy Center in December 2005 that he felt he had made a mistake invading Iraq, to which a Bush spokesperson replied, "This account is flatly wrong." Following bad press resulting from his remarks, Bennett clarified his position, writing, "There is simply no excuse for terrorism and the murder of the nearly 3,000 innocent victims of the 9/11 attacks on our country. My life experiences, ranging from the Battle of the Bulge to marching with Martin Luther King, made me a lifelong humanist and pacifist, and reinforced my belief that violence begets violence and that war is the lowest form of human behavior." In September 2011, Bennett released Duets 2, a follow-up to his first collaboration album, in conjunction with his 85th birthday. He sings duets with 17 prominent singers of varying techniques, including Aretha Franklin, Willie Nelson, Queen Latifah, and Lady Gaga. His duet with Amy Winehouse on Body and Soul reportedly the last recording she made before her death charted on the lower reaches of the Billboard Hot 100, making Bennett the oldest living artist to appear there, as well as the artist with the greatest span of appearances. The single did well in Europe, where it reached the top 15 in several countries. The album then debuted at number 1 on the Billboard 200, making Bennett the oldest living artist to reach that top spot, as well as marking the first time he had reached it himself. A model of COS headphones, the Tony Bennett Signature Edition, was created for this milestone. In November 2011, Columbia released Tony Bennett The Complete Collection, a 73 CD plus 3 DVD set, which although not absolutely complete, finally brought forth many albums that had not had a previous CD release, as well as some unreleased material and rarities. In December 2011, Bennett appeared at the Royal Variety Performance in Salford in the presence of HRH Princess Anne. In the wake of the premature deaths of Winehouse and Whitney Houston, Bennett called for the legalization of drugs in February 2012. In October 2012, Bennett released Viva Duets, an album of Latin American music duets, featuring Vicente Fernandez, Juan Luis Guerra, and Vicentico among others. The recording and filming for the project, in Fort Lauderdale, was co-sponsored by the city. On October 31, 2012, Bennett performed I Left My Heart in San Francisco in front of more than 100,000 fans at a City Hall ceremony commemorating the 2012 World Series victory by the San Francisco Giants. He published another memoir, Life is a Gift, The Zen of Bennett, and a documentary film produced by his son Danny was released, also titled The Zen of Bennett. Artistry, painting. Bennett has also had success as a painter, done under his real name of Anthony Benedetto or just Benedetto. He followed up his childhood interest with professional training, work, and museum visits throughout his life. He sketches or paints every day, often of views out of hotel windows when he is on tour. He has exhibited his work in numerous galleries around the world. He was chosen as the official artist for the 2001 Kentucky Derby, and was commissioned by the United Nations to do 2 paintings, including one for its 50th anniversary. His painting Homage to Hockney is on permanent display at the Butler Institute of American Art in Youngstown, Ohio. His Boy on Sailboat, Sydney Bay is in the permanent collection of the National Arts Club in Gramercy Park in New York, as is his Central Park at the Smithsonian American Art Museum in Washington, D.C. His paintings and drawings have been featured in Art News and other magazines, and sell for as much as $80,000 apiece. Many of his works were published in the art book Tony Bennett, What My Heart Has Seen in 1996. In 2007, another book involving his paintings, Tony Bennett in the Studio, A Life of Art and Music, became a bestseller among art books. Musical style. Regarding his choices in music, Bennett reiterated his artistic stance in a 2010 interview, "I'm not staying contemporary for the big record companies, I don't follow the latest fashions. I never sing a song that's badly written." In the 1920s and 30s, there was a renaissance in music that was the equivalent of the artistic renaissance. Cole Porter, Johnny Mercer and others just created the best songs that had ever been written. These are classics, and finally they're not being treated as light entertainment. This is classical music. Awards and recognition. Bennett has won 16 Grammy Awards and has also received a Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award, as follows: Best Solo Vocal Performance, Male, 1963, I Left My Heart in San Francisco, Record of the Year, 1963, I Left My Heart in San Francisco, Best Traditional Pop Vocal Performance, 1993, Perfectly Frank, Best Traditional Pop Vocal Performance, 1994, Steppin' Out, Best Traditional Pop Vocal Performance, 1995, MTV Unplugged, Tony Bennett, Album of the Year, 1995, MTV Unplugged, Tony Bennett, Best Traditional Pop Vocal Performance, 1997, Here's to the Ladies, Best Traditional Pop Vocal Performance, 1998, Tony Bennett on Holiday, Best Traditional Pop Vocal Performance, 2000, Bennett Sings Ellington, Hot and Cool, Lifetime Achievement Award, 2001, Best Traditional Pop Vocal Album, 2003, Playin' With My Friends, Bennett Sings the Blues, Best Traditional Pop Vocal Album, 2004, A Wonderful World, Best Traditional Pop Vocal Album, 2006, The Art of Romance, Best Traditional Pop Vocal Album, 2007, Duets, An American Classic, Best Pop Collaboration with Vocals, 2007, For Once in My Life, Best Pop Duo Group. Performance, 2012, Body and Soul, Best Traditional Pop Vocal Album, 2012, Duets 2. Bennett has won 2 Emmy Awards, as follows: Primetime Emmy Award for Individual Performance in a Variety or Music Program, 1996, Live by Request, Primetime Emmy Award for Individual Performance in a Variety or Music Program, 2007, Tony Bennett, An American Classic. Bennett has gained other notable recognition: New York City's Bronze Medallion, 1969, star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, induction into the Big Band and Jazz Hall of Fame, 1997, Lifetime Achievement Award from the American Society of Composers, Authors and Publishers, 2002, Kennedy Center Honorary. 2005, induction into the Long Island Music Hall of Fame, United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees Humanitarian Award, 2006, National Endowment for the Arts Jazz Masters Award, 2006, induction into the International Civil Rights Walk of Fame, 2007, induction into the New Jersey Hall of Fame, 2011, honorary doctorates from the Berklee College of Music, the Art Institute of Boston, Roosevelt University's Chicago Musical College, George Washington University, Cleveland Institute of Music, the Juilliard School, and Fordham University. Works. Discography. Bennett has released over 70 albums during his career, with almost all being for Columbia Records. The biggest selling of these in the U.S. have been I Left My Heart in San Francisco, MTV Unplugged, Tony Bennett, and Duets, An American Classic, all of which went platinum for shipping 1 million copies. 8 other albums of his have gone gold in the U.S., including several compilations. Bennett has also charted over 30 as singles during his career, with his biggest hits all occurring during the early 1950s and none charting between 1968 and 2010. Books. Bennett, Tony. Tony Bennett, What My Heart Has Seen. Rizzoli. ISBN A0-8478-1972-8. Bennett, Tony. Fredwald, Will. The Good Life, The Autobiography of Tony Bennett. Pocket Books. ISBN A0-671-02469-8. Bennett, Tony. Sullivan, Robert. Tony Bennett in the Studio, A Life of Art and Music. Sterling Publishing. ISBN A1-4027-4767-5. Bennett, Tony. Life is a Gift, The Zen of Bennett. HarperCollins. ISBN A0-06-220706-7. See also, List of best-selling music artists, Bibliography, Brooks, Tim. Marsh, Earl F. The Complete Directory to Primetime Network and Cable TV Shows, 1946-present. Ballantine Books. ISBN A0-345-49773-2. Evania, David. All the Things You Are, The Life of Tony Bennett. Hoboken, New Jersey, John Wiley & Sons. ISBN A978-0-470-52065-9. Fredwald, Will. Jazz Singing. Da Capo Press. ISBN A0-306-80712-2. Hitbune, Joel. The Billboard Book of Top 40 Hits, 1955 to present. Billboard Publications. ISBN A0-8230-7511-7. References. Further reading, Willis Conover. 20 Years with Tony. Billboard. November 30, 1968. PPT 1T40. Dorothy Andrews. Tony Bennett. Life's Been Good to Me. The Milwaukee Sentinel. November 14, 1980. PA3. Peter B. King. Tony Bennett. I Just Have to Paint, and I Have to Sing. The Pittsburgh Press. February 10, 1986. PSE 6. Tony Bennett, Half a Century and Looking Forward. Billboard. December 20, 1997. PPA 37 €65. Pull-out section includes multiple articles, including, I've Lichtman. Tony Bennett, The Billboard Interview pages 38 to 39, 52 and 56. Tom Vickers. Tony and Columbia pages 40 and 58. Don Waller. When it comes to good works, Bennett does a great job. Pages 42 and 54. Paul Sexton. Bennett over there. PA 44. Mark Rowland. Essential Bennett. Pages 46 and 48. Richard Henderson. Bennett brushes up. PA 50. Backbeat, Happy 80th, Tony Bennett. Billboard. August 19, 2006. PA 61. Jim Bessman. Tony's Long Haul, Strategic Partnerships Fuel Big Sales for Bennett's Duets album. Billboard. November 11, 2006. PA 24. External links, Official Tony Bennett Music website, Official Tony Bennett Art website, Legacy Records Tony Bennett website, Exploring the Arts website, Tony Bennett at the Internet Movie Database, Official Antonia Bennett Music website, the Tony Bennett MySpace page.